Good evening and welcome to Capitol Report on NTD. Here's what's coming up. President Trump says Russia and Ukraine are on track for a ceasefire. That's after talking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. What's in Trump's new proposal for the U.S. to help run Ukraine's power plants? Can the Trump administration argue that the Venezuelan government and cartels are one and the same? Our panel of legal experts weighs in, featuring David Super, professor of law and economics at Georgetown University, and George Fishman, senior legal fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. Israeli boots hit the ground again in the Gaza Strip, while residents in Israel protest the latest military operations. President Trump releases tens of thousands of pages on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. What previously redacted information is included.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
I'm Jack Bradley, in for Steve Lance tonight, and we begin with some breaking news. President Trump's plans to sign an order tomorrow to begin dismantling the Department of Education. NTD's Iris Tao just confirmed the news with the White House. Trump's set to direct Secretary Linda McMahon to figure out the first steps to close the department and return education authority to the states, fulfilling one of his campaign promises. Now, several Republican governors and state education commissioners are expected to attend the signing. While taking steps to close the department, the order says it will make sure to continue programs and services that Americans rely on. Now, it is also seeking to keep the remaining funds away from facilitating DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as gender ideology programs. And Ukraine now agrees to a partial ceasefire with Russia after President Trump speaks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. But as Trump says the two countries are on track for a ceasefire, overnight strikes raise questions about enforcement of a truce. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Iris, good evening. Now, what are the biggest takeaways from Trump's call with Zelenskyy today?
Good evening to you, Jack. So the hour-long phone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy today yielded a few major things. One, Zelenskyy says he's now also agreeing to a temporary ceasefire on energy infrastructure after Trump just yesterday got Putin to agree to one also over a long phone call. And two, there might be a new deal coming up between U.S. and Ukraine. The White House says that President Trump pitched a plan for U.S. to potentially take over and help Ukraine run some of its power plants, including nuclear power plants. And that, the White House says, is to also give Ukraine some form of protection over its energy infrastructure. Watch.
President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
Well, today was the first time we hear about this exact proposal. President Trump actually did tease about talking about power plants with both Ukraine and Russia over the weekend. Watch.
We're talking about power plants. That's a big question. But I think we have a lot of it already discussed very much by both sides.
You'll ask him.
Ukraine and Russia.
You'll ask him.
We're already talking about that, dividing up certain assets. Yeah, and they've been working on that.
Meanwhile, also today, Ukraine and Russia swapped some prisoners to each other. And while we are seeing some progress, questions remain over the enforcement of the temporary ceasefire. Now, both countries are accusing each other of continuing to launch strikes on civilian and infrastructure even after the call between President Trump and Putin yesterday. And now the White House official told us that they believe that such strikes, at least by Russia, were planned before Putin called for the halt of such attacks. And the White House press secretary told us that they believe a peace deal is coming up soon. Watch.
I would just like to emphasize we have never been this close to peace, and it's only because of President Trump that we are here. I think a couple of years ago, as you all reported on the war, it was incomprehensible to have a partial ceasefire in this conflict. And today that is true because of the leadership of this president.
And next, President Trump's team will be talking with both sides, including with Ukraine later this week in Saudi Arabia. The goal is to expand the temporary partial ceasefire. Jack.
Now, there's definitely a lot to watch for there as things slow down in a potential ceasefire. But the last time Trump and Zelenskyy spoke, it got quite contentious. What's the latest on their relationship, Iris?
Sure. So if you remember, the last time Zelenskyy talked to Trump was right here at the White House inside that Oval Office when the two got really heated in their conversation, with both Trump and Vance accusing Zelenskyy of not being grateful enough, and Zelenskyy ended up having to leave early without a deal on the minerals agreement that he was actually supposed to sign with the U.S. That's what brought him here the last time. And this time around, President Trump described their call today as a very good one. And Ukrainian President Zelenskyy also thanked President Trump for U.S. support immediately after the call. There's no mention of conflicts this time around. But meanwhile, when it comes to that minerals deal, the White House today told us that they have moved beyond it. And now the discussion is about a broader ceasefire. Jack.
Very interesting. Iris Tao, NTD's White House correspondent, thank you very much for your time here today. Now, a group of House Republicans have moved to impeach 5 judges for what they call overstepping judicial authority. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have reacted to the state of the balance of power. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has this story.
America would be safer and more prosperous if Democrats and their rogue judges who carry out their bidding loved the American people as much as they seem to love inundating our communities with violent illegal aliens. It is wrong and I believe impeachable for this judge to be usurping that power.
That was Republican Congressman Brandon Gill, freshman from Texas, who earlier this week submitted articles of impeachment against D.C. District Court Judge James Boasberg, who ordered the Trump administration last weekend to halt the deportation of Venezuelan gang members that was being carried out under the Aliens Enemies Act.
I think President Trump has the ability and authority to protect this country from unlawful entry and from criminals conducting criminal activity, and I believe that he acted appropriately and Tom Homan acted appropriately, and that's why I believe overwhelmingly in this country people support that, and they think this judge has overstepped his bounds.
Judge Boasberg is the 5th judge who is facing articles of impeachment from House GOP members. Democratic lawmakers have opposed the deportation process, but not opposed the removal of Venezuelan gang members who enter the country illegally.
If you're in this country undocumented, illegally, and you commit a crime, you're on the next bus out. No, I don't think anybody argues with that. But what is critical there, of course, is due process, right? Get them out, but let's at least make sure that we're deporting people who we know fall into that category. False arrests are made all the time.
On both sides of the aisles, lawmakers want to see the process and the balance of power play out both in Congress and in the courts.
There have been 120 federal cases filed against Donald Trump all over the country, and he has lost already in more than 40 courtrooms across the land.
It is a power that's there in the Constitution, that it's the right of the House to exercise and the Senate then to conduct a trial. The Chief Justice and the President can both weigh in on where they think it is or is not appropriate to use it. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of Congress as set forth in the Constitution.
If House Republican lawmakers pass articles of impeachment against a judge, Senate Republicans will need every vote on the GOP conference and pick up 7 votes from Democrats in order to remove a judge from his bench. In U.S. history, only 15 federal judges have faced impeachment and only 8 have been removed. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Now, to discuss the legal perspective of Trump's deportation of Venezuelan illegal immigrants, we're happy to have on George Fishman. He's the senior legal fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies, and David Super, Carmack Waterhouse Professor of Law and Economics at Georgetown University. David Super, George Fishman, thank you both very much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Now, President Trump invoked the centuries-old Alien Enemies Act on Saturday to accelerate the mass deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members, Tren de Aragua or TDA. David, to recap for our audience, can this law be applied to a gang?
No, it can't. The law explicitly is for situations where we're in a declared war or when an enemy government has invaded the country. You may speak poetically about the immigrants being an invasion, but they're not an army. They're not trying to take our territory. This law doesn't apply.
And George, if an individual's not a gang member, how does that impact the legality of using this law?
Well, there are two prerequisites for using the law. The first is there has to be either a declared war or an invasion or a predatory incursion. The second is that it be the act of a federal government. If those prerequisites are met, any enemy national of that country is subject to summary detention and removal. Any enemy alien 14 years and older would be subject, who is not a U.S. citizen, would be subject to summary detention and removal. In terms of using it against gang members, there's a concept known as the mafia state, in which a particular government is so intertwined with organized crime that there's not a sharp delineation between the acts of the government and the acts of the organized crime group or the terrorist group. And I have argued that an excellent case can be made that the Alien Enemies Act can apply in those instances in which the acts of a criminal cartel, a terrorist group, can be ascribed to a particular foreign government because there's really no differentiation between that government and the criminal cartel. And if the Trump administration can make that case in court, that the government of Venezuela and this criminal cartel, this designated terrorist organization, in essence are one and the same, then I would argue the Alien Enemies Act can legitimately be used against the gang members. I think there's an excellent argument that it can be used in with these mafia states, but that's going to be for the Supreme Court. And the Trump administration is going to have to make the case that, yes, the Venezuelan government is, in fact, in essence, one and the same with this criminal cartel, with this terrorist organization. Being a terrorist organization, as a professor said, is not enough.
Now, deportations under this law have already occurred. Secretary Marco Rubio announced that 250 alleged Tren de Aragua gang members were sent to El Salvador. David, is there any scenario in which these deported individuals could be flown back to the U.S. for further legal procedures?
That's what the administration tried to shut down. The courts here cannot order the Salvadoran government to release them. The Salvadoran government has indicated they're very happy to have them because they're getting well paid. So I think it is going to be very difficult for a court to force them back, but there may well be contempt proceedings against the administration for rushing them out of the country.
Well, Chief Justice John Roberts has pushed back against Trump's call to impeach a federal judge over the Venezuelan deportation block. Now, George, is this an impeachment a realistic possibility?
I've been involved as a staff member in two impeachments: the impeachment of President Bill Clinton, the impeachment of President Biden's DHS Secretary Mayorkas. Both of those passed the House. They were impeached. The Senate refused to act. I would presume, for the sake of argument, if the House were to impeach this judge, the Senate would not convict.
If the Trump administration refuses to comply with a court order, could this escalate to the Supreme Court to determine how his powers balance between the three branches of government? David?
No, if they refuse to comply with a court order, that will be the issue. The Supreme Court has said that you're obliged to comply with court orders, even if those court orders are unsound. They upheld a contempt citation against civil rights protesters who defied a blatantly unconstitutional court order. So they are, if the administration doesn't follow the court order, it will not be able to defend its actions on the grounds that that order might not have been valid. I'm guessing that's what George means by saying, why don't we decide this on the merits?
And George, your response?
Again, I am not an expert on enforcement a federal court orders, but I believe this should be decided on the merits. The Supreme Court needs to decide this on the merits. And look, the Alien Enemies Act was passed by Congress. Judges are going to have to determine the parameters of the Alien Enemies Act. The Supreme Court, on a number of occasions, has upheld the constitutionality of the Alien Enemies Act, most notably in 1948. It has said the president has enormous, almost unlimited discretion in the use of the Alien Enemies Act. But first, the president has to meet the statutory requirements. The first, has there been a declared war, an invasion, or a predatory incursion? The second, was it the act of a foreign government? Once those hurdles have been met, the president can pick the entire enemy alien population and detain and remove them, or pick and choose. It is entirely up to the president. But the president does have to meet, the executive branch does have to meet those statutory requirements, and the court and the Supreme Court has said whether an administration has met those statutory requirements, that's the role of a federal judge.
David Super, George Fishman, thank you both very much for your insights here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
very much for having me.
The Trump administration's freezing $175 million in federal funds to the University of Pennsylvania. Now, that's because the university previously allowed male athletes who identify as transgender to compete in girls' and women's sports. Now, a Penn spokesperson said that the school had not received any notification or details of today's action. It also said that Penn follows, quote, NCAA and Ivy League policies regarding student participation on athletic teams. Now, meanwhile, over in California, the University of California is going to impose a hiring freeze across all 10 of its campuses, including Berkeley, Santa Barbara, Irvine. Now, the UC president here, Michael Drake, says that this hiring freeze is because they expect federal and state funding cuts. The UC system employs over 26,000 faculty, 48,000 academic positions, and 190,000 staff. And Israeli troops have resumed ground operations against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. This comes as residents in Israel are protesting the latest military action in the territory. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Protesters hit the streets of Jerusalem on Wednesday and gathered right outside of the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes just one day after he instructed Israeli forces to resume military operations in the Gaza Strip, a decision many of the protesters oppose.
I want the hostages back. I don't want the war to restart. I think our government is not doing what it should in the interests of the people, but it's self-serving. That's why I'm here.
And one man had this message for Netanyahu.
Can you just lie to the Hamas and bring us our hostages back? We need our people. They are there in the tunnels of Gaza. They are imprisoned in the tunnels of Gaza. This is outrageous.
On the same day, Israel released footage of troops operating on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Israel said they began targeted ground activities in the central and southern Gaza Strip in order to, quote, expand the security zone. A spokesman for the Israeli army explained that Israeli forces had struck terrorists who were planning to attack the state of Israel, and he added this.
We're operating against a terror organization that killed and kidnapped our civilians, that is hiding behind their civilians on purpose, and that has time and time again in this war lied about numbers of casualties and also about their identity. They present terrorists as civilians. This is something we've seen time and time again.
He said Israel has continued to issue warnings for civilians to evacuate, which gives up the element of surprise when fighting Hamas. Residents in the Gaza Strip were seen traveling with their belongings.
Until when will we be like this? Until when? This is the 10th time that we are displaced.
We were feeling safe. We couldn't believe we had just started having stability in our lives, and suddenly, the situation has been turned around under the threat of the Israeli aggression.
Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, gave a message to the residents in the Gaza Strip.
Take the advice of the U.S. President Donald Trump. Return the hostages and get rid of Hamas, and we'll open new opportunities, including leaving to other places in the world for whoever wants to. The alternative is complete destruction and devastation.
And he said if Hamas doesn't return the hostages, then Israel will act with force they haven't seen before. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And coming up, the U.S. defending Israel's airstrikes, putting the blame on Hamas for not adhering to the ceasefire agreements. We'll discuss with Javed Ali, the former senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council. President Trump releases tens of thousands of pages on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This release is said to contain previously redacted information. We'll have that and more when we return.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness. 2025, the 5th NTD International Photography Competition. Capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
Hi, Mike Huckabee here. Having spent many years in politics, I can comfortably say that the current climate is enough to keep any of us awake at night. And I safeguard my well-being by making sure that I get a good night's rest with Relaxium Sleep, America's #1 trusted sleep aid.
I'm Dr. Eric Siliberti, founder of Relaxium, America's most trusted sleep aid.
Just like you're seeing me on television now, I saw a commercial for Relaxium Sleep back then. I called, and the rest is history.
When I take Relaxium Sleep, I sleep better than I have in years.
I wake up feeling like I've had the best night's sleep.
As a clinical neurologist, I know how essential sleep is for building and nourishing both your mental and physical health.
Relaxium Sleep is made in the USA, has no risk of dependency, and is drug-free. It's also the only sleep aid with Valarest as part of its triple action formula.
I developed Relaxium to help my patients fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up refreshed.
Relaxium Sleep worked from the very first night I took it.
You've got to try Relaxium Sleep for yourself, because once you do, you'll be a customer for life, just like me. And right now, you can try it for free.
For nearly 2 decades now, Relaxium Sleep has been changing millions of lives.
Take Relaxium Sleep. I promise you it'll work.
If you're experiencing sleepless nights or tossing and turning, you need to try Relaxium Sleep now.
I trust Relaxium Sleep, and so should you. Get the best night of sleep guaranteed. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Mike Huckabee is so confident that Relaxium Sleep will work for you, he's asked us to give away another 1,000 bottles. Get your free bottle of Relaxium Sleep now. Visit tryrelaxium.com or call 800-418-1606. That's tryrelaxium.com or call 800-418-1606.
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. Now, here to discuss the latest developments in the Middle East is Javed Ali. He's the former senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council. Javed Ali, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Jack, thanks for having me.
Now, the U.S. defended Israel's recent series of airstrikes to the UN, saying, quote, the blame for the resumption of these hostilities lies solely with Hamas. Now, what was the event that sparked an end to the ceasefire?
So based on what's come out in the media and official statements from the U.S. government and the Israeli government, it's the frustration with the intransigence, I guess, for lack of a better word, on the Hamas side of not being more forthcoming in the ongoing phase 2 of the ceasefire negotiations, or the possibility of getting to phase 2, obviously with the status of the remaining 59 hostages, probably half of whom are dead and half alive. I know it's tough to talk about it in those term. So those seem to be the key sticking points. And then I would have to think over the past couple of days that between the Israeli government and the U.S. government, that there was an agreement that Israel was going to resume military operations to put more pressure on Hamas, either to get them back to the negotiating table or to basically end the ceasefire as we know it.
And just for our audience's clarification, can you just describe basically what this phase 2 that wasn't being achieved was?
So backing up a little bit, so from last December, even before President Trump came back into office, there was a lot of work between the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration to actually get very senior officials from both sides to work with Israel to get a ceasefire in place. And there were other parties involved in that as well in the Middle East. So through all that work, by late December 2024, we then had the framework for a 3-phased ceasefire. And it took about 6 weeks to get to phase 1, which ended roughly 2 weeks ago. And in that phase 1, we saw several hostages returned back to either Israel or I think 4 or 5 Americans as well. And that was all celebrated. But about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners were released. And that ended phase 1. And then phase 2, which was supposed to start after the end of phase 1, was basically with the additional release of the remaining hostages and sort of the negotiations to basically end the conflict, where Israel would probably have to pull out its military forces that remain in the Gaza Strip, that humanitarian aid would have to come in unimpeded, and then there would have to be the framework for an actual peace deal. But the Israeli government has said, even to get to phase 2, Hamas cannot be in power in the Gaza Strip.
Right, and over yesterday and today, Hamas has yet to respond militarily to these strikes. Do they no longer have the capacity, and does that mean that Israel has succeeded in eliminating the threat from Hamas?
I mean, that's a good question, Jack. One would have to imagine that there's some residual Hamas military capability. I mean, they probably had about 15,000, 20,000 fighters pre-October 7th, perhaps more. Israel has said they've killed or captured thousands. They probably have some capability left, but they're probably holding that back too, because if they start to emerge on the ground, they are just going to be hit by the Israelis beyond the degree to which Israel's been hitting in the past 24, 48 hours. So they're in a very precarious moment as an organization.
Right now, the Hamas is believed to have about 24 living hostages and the bodies of 35 others. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the latest strikes were necessary for freeing these hostages. How much hope do you have for the hostages?
Yeah, this is another really tough aspect of where things stand in the conflict, that if the ceasefire actually does break down and Israel does full-blown resume military operations, much the way they did from post-October 7th, 2023 up until December 2024, that the status of the hostages who are still alive, that's going to be difficult to determine where they are. Can Israel mount rescue operations, much like what happened last June with a rescue operation that recovered 3 hostages, but also killed dozens of Palestinians? And hostage recovery missions and operations from a counterterrorism perspective are amongst the most difficult to pull off very surgically and precisely. And I would have to imagine that even of the remaining hostages who are alive, they're probably in multiple locations, either below ground or above ground, and are being moved on a daily basis, if perhaps a little less frequently. So this is, if Israel's intent on resuming military operations, but still trying to find the remaining hostages, this is going to be very, very difficult.
Now, another aspect of this in the war with Hamas is the information war and how the rest of the world perceives the conflict. Now, the Anti-Defamation League is reporting that more than 24 Wikipedia editors colluded to put anti-Semitic narratives, anti-Israel bias, and misleading information, their words, in relevant articles. How significant is this allegation, and how much of an impact could this have had?
Yeah, interesting aspect to the sort of propaganda war and information wars that have been going on since October 7th. I haven't seen any of those Wikipedia sites, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that kind of activity is happening. And again, this is another unfortunate aspect of what's transpired after October 7th, is the rise in anti-Semitic crimes and speech, and how that's affecting dynamics here in the United States and other parts of the world. But it's not surprising to hear that that's happening on Wikipedia and probably other social media sites as well.
Javed Ali, former senior director for counterterrorism on the National Security Council and associate professor at the University of Michigan. Thank you very much for your insights here today.
All right, thanks, Jack.
Tennessee lawmakers this week unanimously passing a bill to address Communist China's state-sponsored forced organ harvesting. Now, this marks the latest effort by a U.S. state to target the CCP's human rights violation against prisoners of conscience. Now, sponsored by lawmakers across ideological lines, this legislation is titled the Tennessee Genomic Security and End Organ Harvesting Act. It seeks to prevent Tennessee health insurers from covering transplant surgeries performed in China, along with any operations that source organs from the communist regime. The State Department's annual human rights report has repeatedly mentioned how CCP has been killing political prisoners on demand to supply the nation's transplant market. According to multiple human rights organizations, the #1 target of this is Falun Gong practitioners. Now, that's a spiritual group that endures severe persecution by Chinese authorities. Aside from forced organ harvesting, the bill also seeks to ban hospitals from using devices and software made in foreign adversary states, like includes Communist China. Now, the goal of that is to keep Americans' genetic data from slipping into the hands of countries hostile to the U.S. The act is now headed to the governor's desk for a signature. And the Trump administration publishes the JFK files, making good on the president's campaign promise. NTD correspondent Jason Blair gives us a snapshot into the release.
Trump administration released the files on Tuesday that contain about roughly 60 to 80,000 pages. And some of these files have been released before. However, there was a lot of information redacted, and this batch appears to have much of that redacted information. And this is something that President Trump said that he wanted.
So people have been waiting for decades for this. I don't believe we're going to redact anything. I said, just don't redact. You can't redact, and you'll make your own determination.
The files have been released on the U.S. National Archives website, and it could possibly be weeks before we know for sure if there are any bombshell revelations in the JFK case. So far, there are new details coming out, with a lot of stuff still being discovered. For example, there is information detailing how the CIA went about tapping telephones in Mexico City to monitor communications between the Soviets and Cubans at their diplomatic facilities, which these facilities are where Kennedy assassin Lee Harvey Oswald visited in the months leading up to the assassination. There's also instructions detailing CIA operatives on how to wiretap, and there's new info on covert activities in Cuba targeting revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. And there's been some buzz on a previously released note going around again on social media. This allegedly was written by JFK's son, JFK Jr., in 1994 to then Senator Biden. In the letter, he called Biden a traitor. Reportedly, the FBI did investigate this and wasn't able to confirm that the letter was really written by JFK Jr. JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, reacted to the release, criticizing networks for covering it. He wrote on social media, quote, "You don't need to cover the fake JFK documents story, especially when there's so much real news." And JFK's nephew, RFK Jr., who is the current Secretary of Health and Human Services, has frequently been a supporter of the release of these files. He has previously said, quote, "A government that withholds information is inherently fearful of its citizens' ability to make informed decisions and participate actively in democracy." Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
As scholars and journalists are digging into the JFK files, what do Americans who think about this release? Well, NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
President Trump has released 80,000 pages of the JFK files unredacted. And what's your reaction, and is full transparency on the horizon, in your opinion?
I like the transparency. I was in 6th grade when the assassination occurred.
I don't think it makes any sense to be, keeping things redacted for decades and decades and decades. It's some transparency, and some transparency is good, at least in this particular thing.
I mean, I think it's cool that we finally got them released. I just don't know if it tells us anything new.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information that comes out. It'll be interesting to find, but Will we ever get to the bottom of it? I doubt it very seriously.
You think?
Well, I think we already know what we know, and I think we won't find out anything major. But it's good that we're transparent and we release it.
Are you expecting anything, and like any major revelation coming up?
I think it's going to corroborate the given story that it was Lee Harvey Oswald and not the CIA.
I'm not expecting any huge surprises. It's probably still going to be the official narrative like we've heard.
One thing I heard on the news was that Oswald, even though he was a sharpshooter, they said he wasn't very good. So how could he hit him from a moving vehicle from up there?
And coming up, President Trump has also promised to release the RFK and MLK files. Do you have any expectation for that?
Probably the same thing, same feeling as the other files.
They should release those two as they're gonna, but I have no. Yeah, it's good to be transparent.
I watched RFK get shot. That was right on TV. There was just, too many questions.
I'm not an expert, I'm not a historian. I don't really know what to expect, but I think it's good for history and for scholars to kind of have access to that information.
I'm glad that we have someone in office who's willing to take these steps. I hope that he's fully and faithfully giving out these documents to the American people, as should be.
And coming up, how will President Trump's economic plan impact small businesses? We'll have on Lloyd Chapman, president of American Small Business League, to break it all down.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. For the second time in a row, the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates steady. Analysts say today's decision shows central bankers are waiting to see how the Trump administration's policy changes will impact the U.S. economy. Now, the Fed chair talked about the decision.
The economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. Labor market conditions are solid, and inflation has moved closer to our 2% longer-run goal, though it remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged.
New projections from a group of Federal Reserve officials indicate there will be only one cut or possibly no cuts the rest of the year. With a massive spending cut taking place across the federal government, how will President Trump's economic plan impact small businesses? To discuss, we're happy to have with us founder and president of American Small Business League, Lloyd Chapman. Lloyd Chapman, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, President Donald Trump acknowledges that his economic plan is causing short-term pain for the nation to advance to a new golden age. But how long do you anticipate this transition to take, and what impact do you foresee for small businesses in the interim?
All right, well, let's start off with some facts. I like facts, right? I don't have a lot of opinions, I got a lot of facts. 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small businesses. 98% of all U.S. firms have 100 employees or less. 87% have 20 employees or less, and the average American company has 10 employees. All right, that's Census Bureau data. The only agency in government to support those 34 million small businesses where most Americans work is the Small Business Administration. When Trump took office in 2016, the SBA budget was the lowest in history, and he cut it again. Now, in his second term, he's laid off a higher percentage of employees at the SBA than any other agency. So, I'm not hopeful for Trump's small business programs. I've been predicting for weeks on social media, I think he's going to try to close the SBA or dismantle those programs. Republicans don't seem to like small business programs. I know Reagan tried to close the SBA and Bush Jr. tried to close the SBA. And then, again, when Trump took over, he cut the budget even further. So no president in modern history has cut the SBA budget staff more than Trump. So considering the fact that 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small businesses, it doesn't look good to me.
Do you see the elimination of the SBA occurring altogether under Trump?
He'd like to. I know he'd like to. One of the first things he did, by the way, was to reduce the goal for minority-owned small businesses from 15 to 10%. That's a 10% reduction. That's about $78 billion a year. That's going to put thousands of minority-owned companies out of business. And according to a Senate report, that's going to cost about 1 million jobs a year. So the minority-owned companies, but they're in the middle class. So that's $78 billion a year that won't be going to the middle class and won't be going to minority-owned small businesses. And the Senate report said that for every 1% contracts a small business go up, it creates 100,000 jobs. I think it's probably true for every 1% it goes down, we lose 100,000 jobs. I think that makes sense. So that 10% reduction is going to cost America about 1 million jobs a year. And America's only claiming to be creating about 2.1 million jobs. That's about a 49% reduction in job creation for 2025. So that's a pretty negative thing. And it's certainly not going to make America great again.
Well, there, of course, like you said, there's been repeated efforts to close or diminish the power of the SBA. And I would like to dive into this a bit deeper. Why do you believe that the Small Business Administration is vital to our economy?
All right. Well, it's kind of like math. 98% of all jobs come from small businesses. It's 99.9% of U.S. firms, right? The Small Business Act is the largest economic stimulus program in history. Without the SBA, the largest economic stimulus program in history is going to evaporate. And if we stop giving 23% of all contracts to small businesses, according to the Senate study, that's a 23% reduction. That's 2.3 million jobs we're going to lose. America's only claiming to be creating, I think, 2.1, 2.2. That's going to eliminate job creation in America. I think that alone is going to prompt a recession. But here's the other, why would you want to do that? So what's the logic? What's the justification? What's the rationale? What's the intellect? Why would you want to close the only agency in government that supports 99.9% of U.S. firms? Why would you want to do that?
Well, maybe not even close, but how about cutting out waste, fraud, and abuse, like the contracts that are going to bigger businesses?
Favorite topic. So if we want to cut out waste, fraud, abuse, shouldn't we start where there's the most waste, fraud, abuse? Does that make sense? So if your goal is to eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, why are you looking at the SBA? That's peanuts, right? I use Perplexity. I love that AI software. I typed into Perplexity, how many years could the SBA be funded with the amount of money that's missing from the Pentagon? The answer is 2,600. All right. So if you want to, eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, don't look at the SBA, look at the Pentagon, a lot of places. But the SBA should be one of the largest agencies of government. Again, I don't understand. It represents 99.9% of U.S. firms. They create 98% of all net new jobs. We should be expanding the SBA and expanding those programs and giving more contracts to small businesses. Does that make sense? So my advice to President Trump is go talk to Bobby Kennedy and have him talk to you about his small business, big mid-class economic stimulus program that would literally make America great again.
Lloyd Chapman, President of American Small Business League, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, the bird flu infecting more species of birds and other animals. But what does it mean for people? We'll have on an epidemiologist to explain the risks and share some tips on how to stay safe when we come back.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one get one free offer goes away.
Hey, boss. Okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
You sure?
I said I'm fine.
Since I was little, it was only like me and my parents. You think you created family out of characters? Yeah, of course. I'm gonna take that and make it into a song.
Put me to bed, see you in the morning. With the first did Superman, but it wasn't on it. And we lost it. In my head, in my head, in my head. Where you at? Where you at? On the way out. In my head, in my head, in my head.
Hey, son.
Hey, Pop.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. The bird flu is increasingly infecting different types of birds and animals and shows no signs of slowing down. To dive into this, we're joined by Saira Madad, infectious disease epidemiologist at Harvard. Her work can also be found at Critical Health Voices on Substack. Saira Madad, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, the bird flu has spread among wild birds, now over 100 different species, like ducks, geese, and owls. What does this mean for the spread?
What it means is that we're seeing much more transmission among multiple different species. And what's concerning is when any of these animal species come closer to humans, let's just say domesticated cats, or even dairy cattle, which humans have a very frequent interface with, whether it's occupational or recreational exposure, then you're seeing even more red flags raised, because that means there could be spillover from animals to humans. And that's exactly what we've seen throughout this epidemic. We've had over 70 confirmed human cases and about 7 probable human cases since 2022 of H5N1 bird flu throughout the United States. And so this is very concerning, and it continues to flare up. We're not seeing any signs of this dying down. So we're going to continue to see more animals, unfortunately, get infected, and probably even more sporadic human cases.
Now, there's the H5N1 bird flu that's been spreading, but leading to the mass culling of chickens. But now there's the deadly H7N9 bird flu appearing, which was last seen in 2017. How concerning is that? And the mutations, could it lead to human transmission?
Anytime we have highly pathogenic avian influenza start spreading, whether it's to additional animals or even to humans, it's a big concern, because you can start seeing severe human cases leading to hospitalizations and death. And so even one case is a bit of a red flag for us. And so we need to make sure, how does this case get infected, whether it's animal or human, and how can we prevent additional cases from happening? And there's many different types of avian influenza, out there. We've just talked about H5N1. You've brought up H7N9. These are all highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses that have the potential to cause, high mortality in chickens and poultry that are infected, and also have the high probability and potential of infecting humans, also causing severe illness in humans.
Mm-hmm. And now, a measure that's being taken to prevent the bird flu is the spread is mass culling. The mass killing of the chickens, but it hasn't stopped the spread. It hasn't slowed the spread. It raises egg prices, and it's even spread the virus to workers who are doing the culling. Why aren't there any other measures being taken to curb the spread?
Well, there's a few things that I'll mention. So the reason why we're seeing so many poultry getting infected throughout the United States, in fact, every U.S. state and jurisdiction has seen poultry outbreaks, which is very unfortunate. And this is also due to wild birds. So you're seeing wild birds, for example, flying over, and they can infect poultry, backyard poultry, commercial poultry, and the like. And the biosecurity measures that happen at these farms is, once you start detecting even one case of H5N1, then you have to cull all the chickens or all the poultry there so that it doesn't spread throughout the farm. And this is a highly, virulent, virus in poultry. And so it basically decimates the poultry population. Even if they're not infected now and they do get infected, it's going to decimate them. And so as a proactive measure, when you see one poultry get infected, they live in such close corridors to one another that it's very easily spread. So you do this mass culling to prevent it from basically spreading even further. And that's what's been successful around the world. That's what we're also doing here in the United States. And that's really the biggest mitigation and prevention strategy.
Right, so farmers are probably the most susceptible to getting the bird flu, but for regular people out in the city or in the suburbs, what are some ways they can safeguard themselves against it, and what's the easiest way for them to catch it, actually?
The current risk to the general population remains low currently, because we know that this is still primarily an animal health issue, and those humans that come in closer contact to animals have an increased or elevated risk. So for the general public, there's things you can do to reduce your risk. Number one is, if you see any sick animal, bird, or even cat or dog that is acting weird, don't go near it. If you see an animal that's dead, you can go ahead and call 311, for example, if you are in New York, or if you're in other jurisdictions, find out to see where you can call a number or call some sort of a sanitation agency to go ahead and pick up that dead animal. Don't go near it. If you are cooking, make sure that you're cooking your meat thoroughly. So, for example, cooking beef or chicken or eggs, cook it to the appropriate temperature. Wash your hands. You want to make sure that if you have any cats or dogs, you don't give them raw pet food. We have seen many recalls of companies of pet food that has been contaminated with H5N1. For example, we've just had a couple recalls in California. You're seeing cats, unfortunately, getting infected with bird flu because of consuming, a contaminated pet food or even unpasteurized milk. For yourself and for your animals, make sure you're drinking pasteurized milk, and you're doing your due diligence, right? If you become symptomatic and you've been in close contact with maybe a dead animal or an infected animal, go ahead and reach out to your healthcare provider and let them know your history of, either going to a live bird market or you think you've been in contact with an animal that's been infected. Go ahead and get yourself tested.
Saira Madad, infectious disease epidemiologist at Harvard University and Chief Biopreparedness Officer for New York City's public hospital system. Thank you very much for your insights here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
A rare celestial event is underway. From now through Friday, the planet Venus will be visible in both the morning and evening skies above the northern hemisphere. Now, this happens a few days before the planet passes between Earth and the Sun, and it won't happen again until 2033. You'll find Venus slightly above the Sun after sunset and before sunrise, and you won't need any special equipment because Venus is very bright because of its closer proximity to the Sun. But if the Sun is still in the sky, you'll need to protect your eyes. And now you're up to date on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. From the nation's capital, I'm Jack Bradley. Have a nice evening, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.